It's 1:45. Yeah, thank you all for being here. My name is Janene Cullen. I work for Prince William Soil and Water Conservation District. And I'm excited to be introducing Janene Cullen, Dr. Janene Cullen, and her talk on backyard gardeners in climate chaos. So Dr. Cullen has been a Prince William Master Gardener since 2006. She's also an Audubon ambassador, a Virginia tree steward, and a climate reality leader. Janene is currently serving as the president of the Prince William Master Gardeners Board of Directors. In her day job, she is a satellite engineer providing technical advice to the U.S. government. She is a military veteran, having served 21 years in the U.S. Air Force. Thank you. For now, gardening is a hobby, but she is looking forward to the day she can spend many more hours on gardening and climate reality projects. So here's Dr. Janene Cullen.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you all for coming today. I have found over the years that when you present a topic on climate change, some people are a little bit hesitant to talk about it. And there's a reason for that. Scientists that research the brain know your brain is very efficient. And when you have a big global challenging topic like world hunger and saving the whales and climate change, your brain just like, I can't, there's not a lot that I personally can do about that, right? So we'll leave that to governments and to organizations, and so your brain just doesn't want to think about it. So even though that studies show that most Americans believe and understand climate change, they just don't want to talk about it because they feel like there's really nothing that you can do about it, right? So that's why I'm glad you're here today, because I'm going to tell you some things that we can do and probably already are doing that absolutely does address climate change. I am a master gardener and a climate reality leader. Climate Reality Project is a global nonprofit started in 2006. The mission of the Climate Reality Project is an educational project to share scientific, academic, peer-reviewed science, data, and facts on global climate change. So nobody's opinion, nobody's research papers, just facts. Al Gore, our former vice president, was one of our founders, and some of the charts I'm going to show you at the beginning are charts that he showed at a conference this summer. The presentation is in two parts. The first is kind of just some background information on what is climate change, greenhouse gases, the impact. The second part will be about plants in agriculture. That's what we're here for, right? We want to talk about plants. Yeah. All right, go ahead. All right, just a little background to start with. Oh, and now it's not working. It worked in practice.
I'm trying a few more times.
She said, hit the black part anywhere. And the guy just left. Energy in the form of heat gets re-radiated back out in space. Okay, good. Okay. Oh, and you touched something and it's stopped again. There we go. You just have to check that big block. So as you can see, some of that heat hits our outer atmosphere and comes back down, which is a good thing. That is kind of like a greenhouse, right? It keeps us relatively stable, again, in relation to the other planets in our solar system. So just the right amount of temperature and heat in our atmosphere. However, watch this, the circle, watch the blue line. It's a lot thicker. When you have excess greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, it thickens our atmosphere. It thickens it. So a lot more of this heat now goes up and hits that outer atmosphere, comes back down and warms up our entire planet. So what are greenhouse gases? I'm going to read from the 6 I did it right. So these are the top three greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide, 80% of greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide enters our atmosphere from the burning of fossil fuels, oil, coal, and gas. And excess levels of carbon dioxide can remain in the Earth's atmosphere for centuries. Second one, 10% is methane. Methane gas is emitted due to the production of fossil fuels, oil, coal, and gas. Methane emissions result from agricultural practices and by decay of landfills. See our big landfills, the pipes they put in, that's to release methane in our atmosphere. And that's probably a good thing. You don't want it blowing up right near our community, but it releases it to our atmosphere. Methane, though, is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide, trapping heat in our atmosphere. Excess levels of methane remain in the atmosphere for about 12 years. As a side note here, you've probably seen these commercials on American natural gas, right? The beauty of American natural gas. Natural called natural gas, 80% methane. So it's not natural at all. It might be natural in the ground, but when you pull it out and burn it, it's not natural. So don't be fooled by those commercials. They're telling you fairy tale. Third one is nitric oxide. 7% of greenhouse gases is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide emitted during agriculture activities, combustion of fossil fuels. Nitric oxide can be up to 300 times as potent as carbon dioxide, meaning it heats up our atmosphere and it can remain in the Earth's atmosphere for about 100 years. So this is charts from NASA and NOAA. I like to use charts from NASA and NOAA. Again, those are our American scientific organizations. So again, nobody's research, nobody's opinion. These are just facts. And most of this data is collected from space, from satellites. I know satellites. So nobody, no human in the loop. So this is just data. Huh? Well, no balloons, no Chinese balloons collected just data yet. On the left over there, it might be a little hard to see those units. So as of 2020, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere is the highest it has ever been through history. These are hundreds of thousands of years over here. And this is today. So you can see it's moving around. It's natural, it moves around. But look what's happening. Since 1900, it started going north. And what happened in about 1900? A lot of industrialization, right? Yeah. Factories, fossil fuel processing plants, fossil fuel extraction plants, coal mines, oil wells, just a significant increase in the burning of fossil fuels. And on the right, just bringing it a little closer to our time, this is since 1960. And this is personal to me because I was born in 1960. So just in my lifetime, you can see the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. And it's a one-way. And this, yeah, we're using our atmosphere as an open source, dumping 162 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into our atmosphere every single day, every day. And when you put that much extra greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, this is what happens. So these are, again, NASA and NOAA charts, and this is temperature. So NASA scientists have documented that since 1880, our temperature has increased, our global temperature has increased 1 degree Celsius. So that's about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. So a lot of people mistake or confuse weather and global climate change. Yeah. The weather is what's happening outside, the season, a very temporary thing. Climate change is over decades. So the amount of energy and heat that it takes to increase our entire planet, all the land, all the oceans, all the atmosphere, 1 degree Celsius is tremendous. Think of the Earth being as sensitive to temperature change as your own body is. So 1 degree Celsius, 1.8 degree Fahrenheit. If you have a 1.8 degree Fahrenheit, you're probably not feeling that great, but it's okay. We'll take some aspirin, right? It'll be gone tomorrow. 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degree Fahrenheit, probably not feeling too good, right? Might be on your way to your doctor. 3 degrees Celsius, 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can imagine at 4 degrees Celsius. So think of the Earth, our entire planet, as sensitive to these temperature increases as your own body is. And then on the right, again, just kind of bringing it back to America, you can just see graphically what has happened since 1901. And, you know, look at out west. 20 of the 21 hottest years occurred since 2002. This is since they've been keeping records. Hottest day has been the last 8 years. Definitely a trend here. Record high temperatures in 2021. I don't know if you remember last summer, there was a lot of news that in Northern Europe, particularly around France, they had an extended heat wave, broke a lot of records, and unfortunately, a lot of older people died. And they do not have air conditioning out there. They've never needed it. They do not, because they've never needed it. And when you have a heat wave for a week, you're a bit older, you compromise possibly. So that was a tremendous personal toll. So heat is, the oceans are a great heat sink, meaning they will pull in heat and hold on to it better than land. But because of that, though, 93% of the heat in our atmosphere has gone into our ocean. And that's had tremendous impact to all of our aquatic creatures and our ocean and weather, which I'll talk about in a minute. So here's just the rise in temperature of our oceans. And you see, it's not just surface temperature. It's gone down to 2,000 meters. And again, a tremendous impact to our fishing industry because the fish are as sensitive to temperature as we are. So they move, right? And now they're moving to areas they may not have food, they may not have shelter. So another tremendous impact to one of our fishing industries. And warmer air, as everyone knows, can hold a lot more water vapor. So you take a shower, right? That water vapor goes on yours. So they've done some measurements, and every 1 degree Celsius, it can increase water vapor, how much the water holds by 7%. And they've done measurements, the oceans all around the world, there's already a 5% more water vapor in the oceans. So what happens in the normal weather cycle when all that extra water vapor moves over land? You get some record-breaking precipitation, right? So a lot of journalists are calling these weather bombs. All of a sudden, you just get this massive amount of water. And the earth just can't handle that, right? Too much water at too much. So here is last year in Texas, 9 inches in 3 hours. Just can't handle that. There's a lot of flooding. Some other folks are saying, oh, these are 1 in 1,000 a year events. Yeah. Well, 5 of them have occurred in the last couple of years, in the last year. And here's just another example in Tennessee, 17 inches of rain in 24 hours. So what about hurricanes? So there have not been an increase in the number of hurricanes, but there absolutely has been an increase in the intensity, the wind, the amount of rain, and the size. So that the frequency of category 5 hurricanes has gone up over the past decade. And that's again because of the heat in the atmosphere and the extra moisture, the water vapor that these are holding. So this was last year. This was Hurricane Ian, and this was in Fort Myers Beach, the destruction, and it was so large, it stretched all the way to Fort Charlotte. And you would think we have all this extra moisture in the air, it'd probably be good for the land, right? Just the opposite. The same heat in our atmosphere that is pulling this moisture out of the ocean is sucking that moisture from our land. So there, especially like the first foot of topsoil, sucking that moisture right out. So there's been an increase in the number of droughts in the past decade. And last year, that most of our western states, over 85%, officially declared they were in drought. Another fun aspect for every 1 degree Celsius increase in global weather temperature increase, you get a 10 to 20% chance of lightning strikes. And there is an absolute correlation between heat, lightning strikes, and fire. Six of the 7 largest fires in California's history have been in the last 2 years. So again, all this extra heat in the atmosphere is causing all of our ice to melt, the glaciers and the poles. So this is Greenland, and it has been melting at 4 times faster than scientists had predicted a decade ago. And unfortunately, it's happening at the other end of the world also. So there's Antarctic ice loss. So When you have the extra ice melting, then what happens? Perfect. Sea level rise. Here are the top 10 cities risk of sea level rise. And you get, this is by population. The ice melting causes the sea level rise all in every coast. Correct. Correct. Well, yeah. Correct. It's melt. It was up here and now it's melting and part of the ocean. So Miami's on this list, but it's pretty far down. This is by population. So look what happens when I flip it by financial asset. Miami's now number 1, and New York and Newark are number 3. And we've all seen it, right? Those high rises right on the water, the big condos and the office buildings, they like that view. They are the number 1 at risk. So if they even get especially Miami is at sea level. So a 3-inch rise in sea level, your foundations are going to be wet, your parking garage is going to be wet, your streets, when there's rain, well, the rain goes to the sea level. If your sea level is 3 inches higher, it's going nowhere, right? So that has the biggest financial risk. Exactly. And this is just right. You're exactly right. And you can bring another hurricane in there. This area is not immune to this. Here's Norfolk and Virginia Beach area. We have had an increase in flooding. Here's the prediction of increases in flooding over the next decade. And you can see there's a lot on the East Coast. Yeah. And we get asked this question a lot. If it's global warming, why do we all of a sudden get these periods of really cold temperatures, like last weekend, right? It was really cold here last weekend. So this is how our planet has operated for centuries. Stable polar vortex up top, a strong jet stream, kind of keeps all that cold air up, and the same thing on the south. But when you get all this extra warm air, well, it starts poking into that jet stream, right? And that cold air has got to go somewhere. Warm air is poking up, so the cold air comes down. That's what happened in 2020. This is what our jet stream looked like. And that's why the first time ever, there we go. Texas was in a state of winter warning, first time ever. So that people think it's not, so how can it be warming when it's cold? This is why it's all related. That warm air has got to go somewhere. So it's pushing that cold air just temporarily, but it's pushing that cold air down. So it's all connected. So just adding up all the weather related catastrophes, you can see the trend line. And this isn't even financial, this is just by event. And just one more thing. So if your neighbors don't believe in climate warming, they're going to believe in air pollution. Everybody hates air pollution, right? Burning of fossil fuels creates a lot of air pollution. 40% of Americans now live in cities that didn't even pass basic EPA standards for clean air. And this is all of us, but particularly our children, and then our older people, or anyone that's compromised, like get asthma. And this picture just kind of breaks my heart. Yeah, there's a young athlete jogging, trying to be healthy, and his school going around the track, and just look what's burning behind it. So in 2021, the United Nations made their strongest statement ever. It is indisputable, they wrote, indisputable that human influence has warmed the climate system. Now I'll read the last statement in their summary. The burning of non-renewable fossil fuels is the primary cause for damage to our planet. That was really strong to get thousands of scientists to agree to these statements. They also start talking about agriculture. Where plants start coming. So our agriculture is key to our response towards our climate change. And here are 4 of the principles that they laid out in their plan, and we're going to talk about some of these in a few minutes. Certainly soil health. And here are 10 of the agriculture practices that the United Nations called out. And we are going to talk about a few of these. Certainly no-till, cover crops, composting, yes, my favorite. All right, so what can backyard gardeners do? So I will show you some of the things that the United Nations called out, some of the principles or practices that we can do or probably already doing that will address climate change. And as I kind of said earlier, there are millions of backyard gardeners around the globe, millions of us. And even if it's small little things we're doing, collectively, it will make a difference. Here's 3 areas I'm going to talk about. Each of these have a couple of charts. Take care of the soil, composting, and plant more plants. So taking care of the soil first then. A solution to our quest to help the climate change is like literally underneath our feet. It's our soil. Soil provides 95% of our food. It's a very limited resource that is under increasing pressure from climate change, population growth, urban development, and pollution. So the 5 ingredients of healthy soil listed here, and I really want to talk about number 3. That's the most important, I think. The living organisms, what we call part of living organisms in that first blue block. Worms, insects, fungi, beneficial bacteria, nematodes, those kind of things, all living organisms. There is more living organisms in 1 spoonful of healthy soil, 1 billion, than there are people in the United States. So healthy soil, it's amazing. And that living organisms can help hold that carbon dioxide in our soil because they're living organisms. The plants bring in the carbon dioxide, goes down to the leaves, to the roots. These living organisms eat that, hold on to it as part of their normal process, and they hold on right there in the soil. They can hold on to 25% of the carbon dioxide in their immediate area. First part of taking care of soil is not to damage your soil. These are charts from the Library of Congress. This is back in the American Dust Bowl of 1934 to 40. So everybody know what happened then? Very aggressive farmers out in the west, in the Oklahoma, Texas area, and tractors just started becoming affordable back then. And so the farmers would till, sow, harvest, over and over and over and over again. They never gave the soil a break. And these big tillers, again, they were brand new. They're just chopping up the soil, chopping up the soil. The soil became like baby powder almost. And then in the close to the 1940s, this area got into a drought. The wind started. And you can see what happened to all their topsoil. All that baby powder went all over the place. So bring kind of backed up to our time, rototiller. I had a rototiller. How many have had a rototiller? Anybody? Yeah. I won't say who still has one. Who had one? I had it. It just kind of, it seemed like it made sense to chop up the soil, to put the seeds in and the roots could grow. But really what you're doing, you are destroying the soil structure, and you're destroying all those living organisms. When you rototill, this is the soil food web. Look at all the living organisms are right in the middle. You're chopping those up, or you're exposing them immediately to the light and the air, and you're killing them. You can lose 60% of the carbon in your soil just by chopping them up, just by this rototill. And maybe worse, you're destroying the soil structure. All those the fungi and that beneficial bacteria that's holding your soil together. So when you do get a big windstorm or rainstorm, that soil stays intact. So you don't want to chop up the soil. I put this chart in there because it seems like there is a increasing interest in no-till, or what they call low-till gardening, but I was kind of disappointed. Look at our area. I know. West Virginia, North Carolina, 0 or 10%. So we need to talk to our local farmers and ag companies. Get on board with healthy soil practices. Another step in taking care of soil is to keep it covered, either mulch or ground cover. Mulch, it can be any material you put on the ground just to keep it covered. You want those living organisms to be covered. You don't want them exposed to the light and the rain and the wind. All of that, it can be anything. Even better is ground cover. These are plants. So plants are always better, right? What do plants do? They pull in the carbon dioxide from the air. They got roots in the ground. They're putting out fresh oxygen for us. So anything you can. For mulch, I'm really trying a new thing that's not to let any organic property, anything organic leave, any material leave my property. So even when I trim my trees, I try to cut up as small as I can and just leave them there. Leave them on the ground. They do decompose. And unless it's a disease or invasive weed, then I certainly throw them out. But I'm really trying hard to keep everything on my property, not to put it out in the trash. And really mulch is Mother Nature's idea, right? Every fall, what happens? All the deciduous leaves will drop down. And that's perfect. Leave them there if you can. They're the perfect mulch. And if you have to move them, if they're out in your front yard, and your neighbors are complaining, put them in your backyard, someplace else. I have some raised planting beds, or any extra leaves, I just throw them right in there. And they decompose by the next time, before I need it for the next summer. So mulch is good, her crops even better. And if you can leave them, this is looks like an almond orchard, and they just mow that down once a year and they're needed. They don't have to, use anything else to cover it up, and it's beneficial to the soil and to the environment. The last thing for taking it out of the soil, if you can, at all costs, do not dump chemicals on the soil. So up until 1940s, farmers used manure to fertilize their fields. In the 1940s, they started using synthetic chemicals fertilizers. So let me go. Manufacturing synthetic fertilizer must be done at high pressure and under high temperature. The energy to manufacture fertilizer comes from burning a non-renewable fossil fuel. 1 to 2% of our carbon dioxide emissions are just from generating synthetic fertilizers. Once the fertilizer is found on the ground, a large percent of nitrogen can escape the atmosphere in the form of ammonia gas. And you probably smelled that, especially when you have those big tractors. You've smelled it, the ammonia gas is escaping again into our atmosphere. Once the fertilizer starts to break down, it releases nitric oxide, which as we learned earlier, very potent greenhouse gas. The nitric oxide emissions directly caused by human activities have left 30% in the past 4 decades. And the ample use of synthetic fertilizer also has led to environmental consequences such as agriculture runoff. So there have been studies when these farmers spray all these synthetic fertilizers, the plant only uptakes about 50%. So the other 50% runs off into the local streams and rivers and bays for a time it rains, or the irrigation system kicks in. So then what is it to do? Not only pollution, but you get the algae bloom, right? So the algae bloom smothers the top of the pond, and everything else dies. And there were some stories last year of about 100 manatee that died in Florida, and they can tie it directly back to runoff from farms from further up the stream. And the fertilizers came down, created an algae bloom. It was there for about a month, killed all the plants underneath the bay. That's what the manatee needed. They all died. They all started down. So pesticides. Pesticides, they are insecticides, herbicides, rodenticides, and fungicides. Each pesticide you put down, you have something in mind, a target, but it always reaches a target, and it's usually beneficial. So if you can, do not use it. And one more thing about that, you probably seen some advertisements about, well, our pesticides are plants. So they're, yeah. By the time they get to you, they're so concentrated, they're going to kill all soft body. I mean, even cyanide starts off the plant, right? You concentrate, it's going to kill humans. So that's just a marketing ploy. Even if you cannot, don't use any kind of pesticides. Even if they say it starts off with plants, it's only going to kill this one thing. That's not great. It's going to kill any soft bodies. Compost, number 2. I do a lot of lawn assessment as a master gardener, and my number 1 tip is always compost, compost, compost. Compost is great for your soil structure. It feeds the plants. It stabilizes your soil. So anytime you can, use what's in your house to create compost. Compost creates free organic material made from food scraps and yard debris that you were just going to throw away anyway. Americans throw away up to 40% of the food they buy. And I checked this last week before I told you this, because everyone's complaining about how expensive groceries are right now. 40% away. Crazy. So don't throw it away. Start a compost pile in your backyard, compost, so you get free compost. Chucking perfectly compostable food doesn't just waste money, it increases your own personal carbon footprint. Organic waste slowly decomposing in oxygen or landfill creates methane gas, which we talked about earlier, and about 18% of U.S. methane emissions come from food and yard waste rotting. So put it in your backyard. Save your money. If you don't have to buy compost or fertilizer, you get free compost. So here's the things you need to make compost: carbon, nitrogen, water, and oxygen. Carbon is our browns. When we think of browns, and I'll show you a list on the next slide. Nitrogen is the greens. There's a lot of ways to make compost in your yard. So I personally have 2 that I'm already manufactured that I just roll. I like the ones you push. So I just roll them around my yard. Some people just make them in the corner. I also have a place in my yard, just throw big, like branches and big things. And I just let it rot there. I also do vermiculture. Vermiculture is indoors, so worms. They are not native, but they stay indoors. They stay there. So I've had the same worms for years. And I made my own bins. You can just look up, you can Google it, how to make a worm compost bin. You do need a couple of starter worms, but I mean, I had a little baggie and that had the same thing for your generation. And I've given some away to other friends. These are dynamos at composting kitchen waste. So I probably use the vermiculture more than anything. So you can use any method you want, you can pile in a corner or create the little compost bins. So here's the recipe. 3 parts brown, 1 part green. So if you want to do this, 3 parts brown, 1 part green, put it together. You can't add anything. You got to turn it like once a week. And then in about, depending on the temperature, in about 2 months, you'll have compost. I don't do this. I just don't stress out about this recipe. Think just like half and half and half. If you don't do this correctly, doesn't mean you're not going to get compost. You just won't get it as fast. It's going to work. Vegetables are going to decompose, but it just won't happen as fast. And I keep adding stuff. I don't have something I can set the right ratio and then set it aside. So I just keep adding stuff to mine. I just push around the yard or put it in the vermiculture downstairs. Here's some of the things you can put in there. You see the brown and the green. Personally, I use a lot of vegetables and fruits, so I have more green. I find myself low on the brown, so yeah, I do. I know. Toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls, newspaper shredded. If you can get some of the non-bleached napkins, and if they're not, you don't put grease on them, you just like use them for something wet, something like that. Egg carton, yeah, there you go. Egg cartons. True. Probably any kind of cardboard if you tear it up a bit, as long as it's not bleached and processed. A lot of tape or something on. The only warning is down here in red. No animal products, oil or grease. So no chicken bones. That'll be hard tomorrow at Super Bowl. Everyone eating their chicken wings. Don't throw them in your compost bin. If you have chicken bones and grease and oil and dairy, you're going to get visitors in your compost bin. You don't want them. Mice and rats don't tend to bother decomposing vegetables at all, but they will go after the animal products. Yep.
In Seattle, they can actually have a bin that's just all kitchen, and it can be anything from the kitchen.
So there's a way to do that?
Yeah, they do, but it's a commercial.
Right.
They take everybody's
Yeah.
wet garbage and they do a special treatment on it.
Special treatment, incredibly high temperature, and then they don't let any animals in. So yeah, it's a community, and they tell you can do that, and they're doing a special way, but not in your backyard.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. And where was that? Seattle?
Seattle.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard some of those in California also.
Chicken skin,
Really?
yeah, everything.
That'd be convenient. Be able to put everything out there. And the last tip, plant more plants. That's why we're here, right? I mean, this is the best way to get carbon dioxide out of the air and stabilize your soil. Help our whole climate reality challenge is plant more plants, right? Even better than planting more plants, this is why we're here today, is to plant native plants. You probably heard this in other sessions, but 80%, I think, as Doug said in the little video, 80% of what they did a survey of what we have in our communities and our neighborhoods, 80% is foreign plants, mostly from Asia, 80%. So that means our pollinators only have 20% of our plants to eat and to our habitat and to raise their young. So if at all possible, as you increase your planting beds around your house, I would never say pull anything out, but as you increase, get rid of some of your turf and you buy new plants, just make sure they're native plants. So try to flip that ratio a little bit, try to make it 80% native and then 20% foreign, because the foreign plants are like plastic or pollinated. There'll be a lawn ornament, they can't do that. And the reason, a lot of the reason is a lot of the big box stores that we buy these from, that's their advertising, right? They're pretty and nothing eats them. Well, if nothing eats them, then they're not part of the ecosystem, right? They're not part of the whole chain. If you don't have any insects, you have no birds. You have very little food and you have very little flowers. So we need those insects. Let the insects nibble on the plants. It's okay. You're contributing to the ecosystem and you're supporting our pollinators. And a way for you to get healthy, along with your environment getting healthy, is to create your own backyard garden, a victory garden. This is from World War II, a poster, and they were calling them victory gardens. During World War II, they were shipping all the canned goods overseas to support our troops, and they didn't want the American families left here to think that they didn't have food. So they really did this big campaign on victory gardens. And all the schools and churches and backyards, they all had a garden back in the 1940s, 1950s. Unfortunately, we've moved away from that. Large corporate farms produce over 50% of the food in America. Our food system is responsible for 1/3 of the overall carbon dioxide emissions. And that's because of the chemicals that we've heard talked about before, the back from farm spray, and transportation costs to try to get that food to your door. Fresh produce at the grocery store may not be so fresh. On average, we travel 1,500 miles on trains, trucks, and ships to your place. This creates about 4.8 metric tons of carbon dioxide. So if you grow it yourself, you know that nothing's sprayed on it, nothing's been sprayed on the soil, and there's no transportation costs, right? You go back out and pick it needed. That'll absolutely be the healthiest food that you can eat. And taste it, absolutely. I agree. I plan as much as I can this summer. I need to get more into the canning, preserving it, because I'd like to keep that. Some of you guys know how to do that. I know, that's my next challenge. Figure out how to keep that going throughout the year. All right, so here's just some ideas about what you can do. Kind of wrapping this up. Use your voice. Use the knowledge that you have from the store, this conference. Use your leadership. Talk to your neighbors and your friends and your colleagues about how important it is, the steps and some of the principles that we can do to combat climate change. Your vote, please vote for someone who believes in science and believes in the long-term environmental impacts to our communities. As I said earlier, that climate change is in decades, it's not immediate. So vote for someone who cares decades about your community. And use your choices. We talked about healthy soil practices, composting, and planting more plants. So act like your world depends on it, your actions, because it does. This is our planet. We don't have a planet B yet, even though Elon Musk is working hard on it. Not yet, maybe not in my lifetime, but this is our home, and we need to protect our home and our planet. Here's just a summary. Backyard gardeners and small farmers, and all of us are stewards of the planet's precious soil. Planting native plants, growing your own food, planting trees. That's an act that you can take towards a solution towards our climate challenge. Here's the 3 steps again. And there's some references for you. If you like this message, I wrote a book last year. So it's not, I focus mostly on the agriculture and the plant stuff today, but the book has other ideas like reducing plastic and a circular economy and water conservation, those kind of things. Master Gardener, here's the link there. They do have a email. If you can ask the Master Gardeners anything, they will answer. You can be a plant, disease, environmental question. Audubon at Home, this is a great resource to have. They have lists of native plants, pictures of what they look like, what the plant needs, sun, water, soil, that kind of thing. And a Climate Reality Project. If you're interested in learning more about climate reality, what you can do, we have a lot of chapters globally. There's a Northern Virginia chapter, and there's a DC chapter. I'm a member of both of those. So come and join. So closing statement. Thank you again for coming. I hope this was educational and maybe positive. There are some things that we can do that are addressing climate change. And again, these things may seem little, but there's millions of backyard gardens. So these little things, they add up over time, and it does address climate change. So I know that climate change is a big, scary problem, and that, like I say, our actions may seem little, but collectively they do make a difference. So thank you for being brave and coming today and listening to this. And thank you. Thank you. Questions? We're good? 3 minutes for 5 minutes. All right. Any questions? Yes.
So alternatives to tilling, if we are looking to get rid of the turf, the lawn and everything, how would you recommend kind of?
If you have time, I would recommend putting a newspaper down, your outline of where you want your planting bed. newspaper down, mulch on top of it. It'll take a few months, so before again, I've seen some people plant right into it and the grass does kind of pop up a little bit. If you have time, smother it, but don't smother it with plastic or, any kind of tarp unless it's a landscape fabric, which breathes also, because then you will kill all the living organisms if you do with plastic. But smother it and then plant into it. Now, if it's a brand new garden, like a vegetable garden, turning it over with the shovel is fine. I just try to avoid the tillers.
I could also use what they call a lasagna gardening, which is a little more mulch in between the different layers and then the green.
Yep, and that's again smothering. You smother the grass and it all degrades, and compost down, you get very healthy.
Use all those boxes that we got during pandemic.
Yep. Yeah, cardboard work. Yeah, cardboard might take a little longer because of the thickness of the cardboard, yeah.
You would mention not using any kind of, these things that they say they're made from plants. Is that pure neem oil?
Neem oil's okay, I mean, that's, you brush that on the leaves, right?
Yeah.
Or do you spray it?
I spray it, I mix it with.
Put it on the plant itself,
Water,
yeah.
and a little bit of,
Neem oil, yeah, that is all natural and it's not good, it's smothering, it's not not killing, it's not going after the nervous system, it's just smothering.
And I try to do it like right at the end of the day. So
Right.
hopefully they're not as prevalent.
Right, very good, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's not toxic chemical that's going after something soft body insects nervous system.
Two questions. One, you mentioned putting newspaper or cardboard or whatever on there. Doesn't that ultimately change the soil content? It kills off grasses and stuff, but doesn't it change maybe the pH?
Yeah,
of the-
not
Not
significantly, no, it may be temporarily, but the pH of your yard is not gonna change, even if you do an isolated thing, unless you're dumping chemicals on it. Just smothering is not, and the grass will go down, create compost, so it'll be the same pH as the rest of the yard.
And everything was, you are corn gluten.
I have, yeah, and that's all natural, it's certainly not, should say it's not as effective as the other. Yes,
It's the bad stuff,
yeah, that's the bad stuff, right? But yeah, I used it 1 year. I didn't see much of a difference, Yeah, but it's not bad. It's corn gluten, right?
Suggested, I was trying to get some like crabgrass and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's moved into my garden beds, and they suggested that, but they said it
Yeah.
doesn't happen with one.
Okay, maybe I just wasn't diligent enough, yeah.
2 or 3.
But that's all natural. It's almost like compost almost. Well, but it because it's so the way they dry it kind of like inhibits the weeds. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but it's all natural. It will break down. Dogs can eat it, so it's not. Right.
And it doesn't change the soil.
No, but it is pH.
Are the composting worms, are they invasive? So you shouldn't let them.
So if you put them out in the yard, like when I twice a year I empty out my bin, I try to get from the bottom, they're gonna die. They have to stay between 50 and 70. They're very sensitive to temperature. So if they're out in your yard, they're gonna die. They're not like the Asian jumping worms that we're having now. So they're not invasive. They're not gonna live out there. Yeah.
I used to clean mine so carefully, but now I just go, oh yeah.
Yeah. So you just move the top, they live in the top couple layers, so you just move them off the sides and you scoop out all the stuff at the bottom. And throw it out in your yard, throw it anywhere. It's great compost. The worm castings are almost like the best. And then you get a little bit of fluid under there and then people pay for that stuff. That's a compost tea. Yeah, yeah, that's great, that's great. So set up one of these in your basement. I just looked online how to make my own, no cost. And I got the worms to my friends. So if anybody wants worms, I have one. You can order them. You probably have a friend to have them. So, yeah. If you got one, there you have a new friend.
I just wanted to share what I started the question. My friend was recently in my work magazine, that there's studies being done in Denmark where they're seeing that leaving the leaves on the ground is trapping CO2. Just the simple act of leaving our leaves on the ground. I mean, can you imagine around here in October, the leaf removal that goes on? And if everyone would just move the leaves down or move them around, that in itself could have I think Jim,
I agree, it's
yeah.
not carting them off to the landfill, so it creates all this methane, you know, so leave it in your yard. They're the perfect mulch and it helps with soil conditioning and it feeds all those living organisms. They're in the top like 3 or 4 inches of your soil. You just leave it. And so you can be a lazy gardener. Just leave it.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's hard though,
Like,
when
when you look at-
to do it, you just feel like, "Ooh, I should be out and do this."
I do a little bit in my front yard, but the backyard, really, I don't touch anything.
And then you had mentioned something about roll your compost around the yard.
I think,
What is that? Do you
Um,
need
the
just a big round bin?
yeah, well, it has sides, the tumbler, there you go, the tumbler, yeah, you can just shove it. And then when it's full, I just open the lid, shove it around my yard, and you come down from, so you have to raise it a little bit, but not much. You know, I didn't think it's lazy, or good. Push it around your yard, you know. Yeah,
I have a big pool, but I can't.
then you have to turn it, yeah,
But I can't get it.
yeah, it's too hard to turn, yeah. So I like the tumblers that have like a size on, like a, I don't know, like, it has like 8 sides on it or more, because then you can shove it and blanch, as opposed to the totally round one. You shove them, sometimes they come right back, you know, yeah, or keep going, yeah. So you need something in there to let it, so get some that's round almost that has sides on it. That's my favorite kind, besides the round. That's what I use the most. Yeah. Well, another hand.
We find your compost.
I do not, not at all. I just throw it. I just break it and throw it. And it decomposes so fast. You'll see it for a week or 2. You know, after you empty it out of your compost, and it is. Okay,
So I can go change that.
yeah,
But,
that's great.
when it comes out, it still has some.
That's fine. Just throw it out in your yard. It's good for the ground. It's good for your plant vegetables, good for trees. Yeah, we do that at the TT garden, master garden, any master garden, yeah, we have. Bins, and they're different, consistency. I just don't have time for that. I throw it all in there. Oh, I don't
Yeah, just following the composting thing, yes. I don't use it under, that I buy plastic, brush cans.
Okay.
I open holes around, and I never because, you know, the idea from is for the air, to give variation. So I open holes. And I throw the thing, and, you know, I don't follow, I'm an engineer as well, but I don't follow the area, the one that, you know, that represent. And when I go and dump something that I have on my kitchen little container, you know, I got one of these 3, 4, you know, things, call it, you know, four, yeah, and I just mix it little, and I let it be, so it is so simple, like, but the idea is open the holes, so that.
Yeah, you saw the what you need to make compost oxygen wonders. You absolutely do. You have to turn it or stir it or turn it somehow.
But I do cover and
It's easy and it's free.
you know, it will decompose, no matter what. Gonna happen, it decomposes, yeah, so
Yeah.
eventually you get, you know,
And it's great stuff.
yeah, oh,
You're
yeah.
saving money, you have to buy compost at the store or fertilizer. It's great. All good. Different.
So in my house, the prevailing wind always blew all of the leaves from around the neighborhood into this one corner. So I go like, oh, so I put my compost in it, it's on a stand over the leaf pile. And when it gets down a little bit and it's a little bit too soggy, you know, I just take the leaves that are underneath there. And then whenever, falls out of there, I ended up having, small pumpkins, that grow out of, drum seeds down from the compost. And I had 12 or 15 little pumpkins growing out.
It's like healthy soil, right? That's a great solution. Anyone else?
That's about the leaves, so everyone says leave the leaves. But what's the verdict on mowing them and chopping them up? Is that
It's okay.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, if they're out in the middle of my yard and I know it, I'll just go ahead and But there are insects that roll themselves up in the leaves, and if you mow them, you could be ruining some, killing some of those insects. So leave as many as you can hold the deciduous leaves. Now, there's other kind of leaves, like I have a lot of magnolia trees in my yard. You can't leave those on the grass, and you have to chop those up, because they'll last for 6 to 8 months, and so they will smother your grass. It's a big green leaf. But the oaks and everything, they will decompose. You can leave them. And if people say, oh, they're gonna put grass. Unless they're like, 6 foot. But it isn't for so long.
Just trying to talk to people that aren't, as conscious about this sort of thing. I think it makes them feel better that I'm like, oh, just chop it with your mower. I think that makes them feel better, but
There's a lot of moths and bees and other insects that roll themselves up in the leaves for overwintering, so you can chop it.
so, okay, I'll tell them
That's
that.
to rake them all back up to the, under the trees, that they can, off your grass.
And also, if there are so many weeds, so people have so many trees, but you just keep them and this is not practical. So we say at least leave a portion of the ground.
Yeah, leave as many as you can.
And, hang them, from the backyard, and you have to send some to the land people, no, we don't do land people here, to the incinerator, that's what it calls. They can do it, but we say some people leave something, you want birds in the spring. Sure that they have food, and the food is here, and maybe for them.
Yeah.
What's the difference between leaving them on your yard or blowing them into the woods under your trees?
So really no difference. I mean, they're gonna decompose anywhere. It's just a matter of where it looks. It's not the
Is it
same.
better to leave it on? leave them on
Yes,
where
because
were?
they decompose and they create not a lot, but some nutrients for your grass. So it's minimal, but still, and it helps the soil structure also. So, it helps. So just leave them where they're at. Yeah, leave them if you can. But you've got trees, big oak trees bordering your grass. Sometimes it might get too much. So push some of those back. But if it's a couple inches, they're fine. They're gonna decompose. They're gonna actually help the soil underneath the grass.
Or change it steady.
Huh?
In your garden. Change it steady.
For aesthetic, that's right.
Before you lost everything was green.
Yeah,
Now,
doesn't need
the ones that I see are not being on, in the thing.
The man, you heard them talk about sterile landscape. That's a sterile landscape. Everything's neat and clean and put out away. We don't, that's not good for our pollinators.
The man I heard was a gardener, couldn't believe I couldn't. All this long, I know it. Yeah, we don't do this.
Or blow them into your garden.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
That's what I do a lot.
I did, in the winter, I'm not using my vegetable garden or pile leaves on top of it. In spring, when I need it, I can turn it a little better. By that time, a lot of people make some photos. And you just plant right in there.
Can you end up having too much too many leaves on your trees, under your trees? Like, we have certain little forest kind of area. It's not going to.
I mean, if it's like a foot or so, I would say, yeah.
I think about what.
Yeah, so, but can you push them back to where there's the wooded area, not grass?
Oh, well, it's all in a wooded.
Oh,
wooded area, but it's
like,
like.
it'll decompose. I wouldn't leave a foot under grass, but underneath in the wooded area, I would leave it. It will decompose. It'll decompose like that and that. Yeah.
So do we have a chat group in the Zoom that wanted to? Should we comply? The minute we talk more about the leader conversation or changing native plant. They put out my year playing in leaf litter, talking about the importance of maintaining that leaf litter for insects. I think that, is reiterating what we're talking about as well. And Julie Flanagan in recreating forest for your yard, she said there's no such thing as too much of that.
In the forest,
Yeah, in the forest, yeah.
Yeah. You
So,
can leave
yeah,
it all,
exactly.
in the forest, leave it all. Again, a foot might smother your grass, but in the forest, it will decompose to nothing by the next summer.
That's what happens there. when
That's
you're-
what you've been doing this for centuries, right? But when you're like, oh, don't worry about it. Mother Nature's got it.
Could you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry, what was the name of it? I heard you telling her. Could you take it?
Virginia Native Plant Society, they are here. The production is called My Year Playing in Leaf Litter. Max Berlato talks about the importance of maintaining that leaf litter.
It's in the book.
it's a webinar recording, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And assessment.
Yeah, and the other, and, we have Elaine Mills, who is mentioning, a series on climate conscious gardening. That's, MGNV, that's Gardeners in Northern Virginia.
Yep.
Climate change.
Okay.
That's kind of hard to relay.
Maybe I'll sign it. Okay. Anything else? We're all good? Thank you so much.
The next session is at, 3:00. But I think people need it. I'm gonna tell them that they can.
Yeah.
Okay, last, I was going to say.
Yes. Thank you.
Program coming up with a dog.
My year playing in week later.
But then you say, let me probably after that.
Climate conscious gardening.
Where's that?
That's. I don't know if.
Or is another quality?
Audubon theory and that, that's the gardeners of Northern Virginia. They are not here today.
Right.
Start with like. That's on Northern Virginia. What do you think? Going what is not this year, but last year, I went on the green.
So most of our native leaves are underground in there. They're underground.
That's what I'm. Oh, what's so much? Oh, that's not. I wrote it something. But they, and I thought they'd be back this year.
I live in Princeton, you know. Yeah.
All right. All right, because I know I've seen it before.
Okay. Maybe on a recording somewhere. I've done a couple of these.
That's true, that's true. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very
Really clear. Or your work, or whatever you want to. A lot. It, you know, you were talking about.
How many do you think are going at a time?
That is something, climate change, reduction, deforestation, and, you know, planting non-native. It's really hard.
Maybe it was two things to remind me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, a lot more we can do, but.
Yeah. I think I hope so.
You may have.
Yeah. In Arizona.
Right, yeah.
We care about because the dust bowl.
Right.
Yeah, that's when they enacted the soil conservation. I think they called it, but we're.
Have all that silly.
Yeah.
So I'm the one to deliver by the around our time. That's for the Regarding stuff, based on you. The project the main was there again, but conservation service, he lobbies Congress as local soil and local public works through Washington DC. And it's like the whole is really good. Big discussion of, good, review of like what absolutely, plan, like the conservation system and like.
At RCS and, like,
Didn't think about it, we got all this water down there, but so many students, why is it still out? But the hot air is from the market. I mean, you can, oh, yeah.